back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Tuesday, December 1st, 2015, and oh my gosh, I can't believe it's December already. It's just 24 days until Christmas, folks. So if you haven't started your shopping yet, you should do what I do when stress arrives. When in danger, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. But the guy who calms me down is our co-host today, the Prince of Twitter, Andrew Malcolm, at AHMalcolm on Twitter, investors.com/Andrew Malcolm at Investors Business Daily. Great website, especially the editorial side. Andrew, great to have you back. And I'm kind of hoping that your Thanksgiving went a little better than my Thanksgiving.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Well, the first mate got a little ill on the trip,
I'm
and
sorry.
we ended up having an interesting Thanksgiving breakfast in the emergency room. So there you go.
Oh, no, that ill.
Yeah,
Oh.
well, I mean, they just needed to rehydrate her. It was sort of like a routine sort of ER thing. And in fact, we were discussing it with the nurse, and they said, we get about 50 a day during this week that need to be rehydrated. Just,
Really?
Yeah, that time of year you get bugs going around, and so she's still not 100%, but she's gamely hanging in there for the Ed Morrissey Show today. So everybody say hi to the first mate.
Bugs? Yeah, I hope she's feeling better quickly.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I don't think there's such a thing as a routine emergency room visit, Ed. I think that may be some kind of contradictory term.
Well, we've been to a few of them. We've been to a few of them, and it really was something that you had to go to the ER for, but was not necessarily a crisis sort of situation. Just needed to get the IV and get a couple bags of fluid, and that was sort of what the deal was. And we were there a couple hours, and then they let us go, and ended up going over to my mom's via Passos for Thanksgiving. Actually, my aunt who lives by my mom, and so yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Well, Thanksgiving is my favorite family holiday. Not counting illnesses. It comes and then it goes, and you don't get a whole lot of bills 2 weeks after. It's
there you go.
And it's a family time, and because of my Canadian heritage, I get the Canadian one in October, because harvest came earlier up north, and then the American one now. And the American one is spiced on Sunday with Canada's Super Bowl, the Grey Cup. So it's a good weekend all the way around. I just love Thanksgiving.
Well, yeah.
And our boy was home with his wife from the Air Force. So
nice.
It was just grand.
Yeah, it sounds great. So congratulations, and glad to hear you had a happy Thanksgiving. But we're all back to work now, Andrew. We're all back to work this week. And
speak for yourself, Morrissey.
Oh, are you off?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm not.
Well, back to work is a term of art.
Yeah, that's right. My commute is downstairs.
Your commute is downstairs. Okay, well, so is mine. Mine's actually upstairs. I have the 5-step commute every day, and I actually managed to shave. So
I bet it was a little cooler back home.
It was. It was. I think when we left, it was. You guys were like strapping on the parkas and the gloves
it was below 50 at night.
It was. You guys were freaking out.
Time, yeah.
We got back here and there was snow on my driveway, and I don't think it's gotten above 33 since I've been back. So that's for a high.
It was. I live in the desert, and it was 37 here early this morning.
Forgot about that. Yeah, it gets a little chilly out there in the desert.
But it's what is it? It's a dry cold.
It's a dry cold.
I don't know.
Not this week. It's been a wet cold. We've got this wet, heavy snow I've been dealing with for the last couple of days. I had to go out and I got the Arians snow thrower out there, and it's working great. That's
wonderful.
My favorite winter toy is my Arians snow thrower.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's awesome.
When we lived in Connecticut, I had and Montana, I had a little. Well, not so little, but a Sears tractor, a garden tractor. So it wasn't a tractor, but it was like a four-wheeler, like an off-road thing, except it wasn't off-road. And in the winter you took the mower off and you put the snowplow on the front uh, with the extra weights, and I'll tell you what, and you could tilt the snowplow left or right or straight. I mean, I was just like you. It was a little construction toy guy out there in the driveway moving snow around and wishing it would snow some more if I didn't have to go somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean that's I have a lot of fun with this stuff, but quite frankly, I'd be okay if I didn't have to pull that out all year. But as long as the need exists, I actually am. I'm actually kind of happy to have the to have that in my garage. I'll tell you this. I mean, we're going to get to the news here in just a second, but I do have to tell Andrew this story. When I first moved out here, there was a lot of costs that got added in, and I was not making the kind of money that I'm making today. I was making pretty good money, but I wasn't making, I was making less than what I'm making now. And, we wanted to sort of, I don't know, what's a good, cut
Scale
corners,
down.
cut corners. And
Yeah.
so I was told, you're going to need to get a snowblower because you're not, with my back issues, you're not going to want to have, you're not going to want to have to shovel all the time out there. And that sounded good to me. So I go to the store and I think, okay, I'm going to get myself a snow thrower, but it's not a big driveway. And, I don't need to, like break the bank on this thing. So I get this little, 2-cycle thing, right? It's got a plastic cover on it. And the first couple snowfalls put about an inch on the driveway and it works great. Picks it up, throws it out. I'm doing fine. Then comes like that 4 or 5 inch thing, right? Where it's kind of starting to settle in on the driveway and backing up. And this plastic thing would just right over the top of it. Wouldn't get underneath it. Wouldn't actually scoop the snow. It would just start to roll up on top of it. And you just be like pulling out the first, the top
over the snow,
the top half inch of it. You just throw in the top half inch of it. You have to keep going over it and over and over to. I kept that thing for like a year or two, and I said, okay, this ain't working. And I got myself the one that I have now about 10, 11 years ago, and I love it. It's great. Well, maybe even longer ago than that. So it really, so I'm proud of my little thing there, but
you should be.
I should be.
It's
So
great fun. The best part was when we were in Montana, which, contrary to people's common thought, the capital in Helena and much of Montana, they don't get a lot of snow. They get a lot of cold, but it's basically Arctic, so it's so cold that it can't hold the moisture. So, you might have a blizzard when you got up in the morning, but you knew by lunch it was over because it was the mountains, and sure enough, it was over. And you got bright, bright sunshine. And I thought I hated winter. But what I hated was the eastern and midwestern gloom of winter. The dirty snow, the clouds for days on end. And Montana, I was like, okay, it'd be cloudy for a few hours, and then it's like California, except it's 0 or 10 below. And I made, and you plug your car in, and everybody, like you with the snowblower, you live with it. And we had our son was starting to play hockey then, and very seriously, and we had a landscaper build a 1/3 size ice rink, but we lived on a mountainside, so we had to fill it up and level it, and he had a laser, and so the water didn't run off. So Thanksgiving, I was out there running the sprinklers for the initial cover, and then filling it up with water. So I'd be getting up, setting the alarm, getting up at 2 and out there with my huge halogen lights on, making ice. It was one of the most satisfying, I wrote an article about it for the Notre Dame magazine. It was one of the most satisfying times of my life. Making ice for your kid to have a healthy activity in the middle of the night with the stars out. You could hear wild animals in the woods. And, you had a parka on. It was cold, but it was, when I don't know if you've ever been to a hockey game, but when you watch the Zamboni and there's all this crusty ice and chipped and scraped, and then the Zamboni goes over it and suddenly it's just like glass. That's what I was doing. It was so it was so goofily satisfying. That's one of the things I really really miss about about Montana.
Well, come up to Minnesota and you can get at
Yeah,
least a little
that's
taste
right.
of that. You can get at least. All right,
Even
so
my son in Chicago even has a little rink in
there you
his
go.
backyard that he makes for his boy. So
There you
it's a
go.
very Canadian family kind of thing, I think.
All right,
Minnesota.
so we got lots of news to go over here.
Okay.
What's your top story today, Andrew?
Well, I've been thinking, and I wrote a column this morning about Paris and Obama. I cannot get over that global warming is the most serious national security threat that we have, and I was also mightily annoyed with Obama going abroad again to apologize that we are the second worst emitter in the world and we really have to do something about it. When actually, he could have very easily gone over, and if you look at the numbers, he could have boasted that once the world's largest carbon polluter is now plummeting. The numbers, the volume that we are putting out has been cut, not because of Obama, but it's been cut in the last 25 or 30 years. And you may see an editorial about this in tomorrow's Investors Business Daily. It's just outrageous. The guy flies a 747, takes his wife with him so she can shop in Paris for Christmas, and then goes to this conference, apologizes about America,
Yeah,
and
for what, the 87 billionth time or something like that.
yeah, and flies his 747 for 7 carbon footprinting hours each way. And of course, she came back separately. So there's 2 planes to accommodate that. 150 leaders, all of whom I doubt walked to the conference.
Or flew commercial. I doubt very seriously that any of them flew commercial either.
Yeah. So the whole thing is another one of Obama's legacies. And his big complaint there was our biggest enemy that we're going to fight at this conference is cynicism. So I listed 8 or 10 of the top 60 things that Obama's done to make Americans cynical. It's like, gee, I wonder, how did we get cynical with this guy? They still got 415 days to go.
To quote Shakespeare in Love, it's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
So
Here,
what's
I like
top
Insta-
on your list?
Well, we'll go with this one for a moment. Like Instapundit said, if they were serious about this, they would have done it by Skype. These guys have video conferencing. They do video conferencing all the time.
Yes.
I'm not sure why, in the age of virtual conferencing, that you have to have 150 leaders climb on their private jets to fly someplace to complain about carbon emissions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a silly. First off, I think it's a silly issue anyway. The Earth has warmed and the Earth has cooled for many billions of years without our presence. And as I was saying to somebody the other day, the Earth is getting a little warmer, which is I believe is probably true. The Earth is getting a little warmer. I replied, when they're farming, wake me up when they're farming on Greenland. Because, in the 1200s, 1300s, they were farming the entire landmass of Greenland. It's covered in glaciers today. So obviously it's been a lot warmer than it is right now, and the Earth did not come to an end. Human beings actually survived that better.
5 billion years of Earth, and we're talking about the end is imminent if we don't do something, if he doesn't crush our coal industry.
Yeah, it's always the same solution too. Government has to take control of energy production. The government has to tell people that they have to live on less. This is Jimmy Carter's malaise, only with 2 terms rather than 1 term. So yeah, that's.
Oh, and 2 weeks ago he was. This also graveled my backside. He was in Malaysia and he had an endless town hall with young people. And he was listing the pitfalls that they need to avoid in their countries, which, he found in the U.S. So the first black president of the United States is telling them how America is still caught up and torn apart by racial divisions after 2 centuries. And I said, well, how did you get in office if we're so hung up on race? And yeah, we regret it, but you're there, you know. So, geez. And he was reminiscing about growing up in Jakarta, and every few years somebody would say, "What are the Chinese doing here?" And there would be riots, and houses and stores would be burned down, and people would die. So, well, I don't remember that in modern America. There's no country in the world that has made greater progress on race than the United States of America, and maybe Canada. Uh, so for him to go abroad and bemoan the state of race relations and brag about how strong he's made the economy,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
not
it's
only
just
that, but
beyond belief. And there's no consequences, Ed. There are no consequences for him or Susan Rice or Hillary or any of those people that are always telling lies. Or for Trump, he gets big applause, goes up in the polls. I don't understand this.
no, we can get to that in a minute. I got a column coming out tomorrow that talks a little bit about that, sort of indirectly, but the other thing that happened at this conference today, apparently earlier today, was that Barack Obama was addressing the shooting at the Planned Parenthood clinic, and he said, shootings like that don't happen over here in Paris, which just had 130 people shot to death by ISIS, which is contained. ISIS is contained. So yeah, he literally stood there.
When I was a student there in the 60s, the Algerian Revolution was going on, and every few days there was a cafe blown up, and the police, because I didn't look French, I guess, but I had a little motorbike, the police would stop me and anybody else who looked suspicious and talk to you and discover that I had absolutely no connection to Algeria and let you go. But these kinds of things erupt. This is what, 60 years ago, almost.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Obama did, besides saying goofy things like that about the gun, is every leader who spoke, they didn't all speak, thank God, that's 150 plus, every leader was allotted 3 minutes. Obama took 14 because Obama.
Because Obama, right? Because he's entitled.
So he favored them with 1,748 of his wonderful words and apologies for America. So the guy is an embarrassment. I'm sorry. And one of these shows, I'm going to tell you what I really think.
Yeah, don't hold back, Andrew. Don't hold back. Tell us what you really think. Yeah, to me, it's amazing that you can stand in Paris and say these things don't happen outside the United States. First off,
I know what
they
planet
do.
Is he didn't have a teleprompter, I'll bet.
No,
that's when he gets in trouble. That's when he made his red line and Syria comment. There were a couple of other things that he said that are innately stupid without the teleprompter. And again, there's no consequences.
Well, I mean, he was not on the teleprompter when he was talking to George Stephanopoulos about ISIS on November.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
it aired on November 13th.
Contained.
I think it was taped the day before or 2 days before that. But it aired on Friday morning, saying that ISIS is contained. We've contained ISIS, and within hours you have the massacre in Paris that killed 130 people. And today, I don't know if you saw this, Andrew, but. Yeah. The chair of the Joint Chiefs, General Joseph, Dunford. Dunford, thank you. Joseph Dunford was asked straight out by Randy Forbes, Congressman Randy Forbes from Virginia, is ISIS contained? And ISIS, and he says, we have not contained ISIS. We have not contained ISIS. Forbes went on to press him on this issue, saying, is the White House adopting the policies that the Joint Chiefs are endorsing? And kind of like, well, now they are, or they are now, or, recently, since I've been chair, which is just, I think, a few months, because Martin Dempsey was
3 months. Yeah.
3 months. Yeah. So for 3 months, they've been adopting, at least for 3 months, they've been adopting that. But
and in another room, Defense Secretary Carter informed Congress that Obama is sending more troops on the ground, special ops guys over there.
Well, okay. I actually don't think that that's a bad idea.
No,
but
it's not. But it's not a good idea to say I'm never going to do it, and then you do it incrementally in stages that won't win it. I know somebody who's in the Air Force with friends, and they were telling me that they just came back from bombing or trying to bomb ISIS, and they were required to drop leaflets over ISIS installations, warning them that an attack was coming 24 hours in advance. Yeah. So that's plenty of time to get your trucks and people and everything away so that you're only blowing up structures.
Yeah.
And this business over oil trucks and not bombing the oil wells because we want to protect the environment. What about the human environment? All the bodies, the beheaded bodies and shot fathers because they're in the wrong sect, piling up over there. What about that environment?
Well, there's actually, that's a stupid reason not to go after the oil. The smart reason not to go after the oil, and it's not necessarily a convincing case, but it is a smart reason, is because eventually, if you're going to have a stand-up government that will stabilize those areas, they're going to need the oil revenue in order to do it. I mean, they're going to have to be producing oil, and you don't want to eliminate the possibility of them being able to stabilize later with that oil revenue. So there's a strategic component in selecting those targets, and I get that. But
however,
it's
trucks.
Dumb. Yeah, you can go after the trucks, and besides which...
But they didn't go for the trucks because it has a driver, and they didn't know whether ISIS, whether he was an ISIS guy or not. So we can't shoot up the trucks.
Well, look, this is the difference between being at war...
The hidden reason is because ISIS is selling oil to Turkey.
And Syria, for that matter, which is the reason why Russia wasn't necessarily keen on shooting them until after Russia's own people got killed by ISIS. Now all of a sudden they're a lot less particular about that. But that's definitely one of the unspoken reasons that they didn't go after him until this point in time. But even if you cite the smart reason that, look, this oil belongs to the legitimate government of Iraq, and hopefully the successor legitimate government of Syria, and we're going to need to make sure that they have that revenue on hand so they can stabilize the countries. That's actually an intelligent argument. It may not be a convincing argument, but at least it's an intelligent argument. But this idea that we didn't go after them because we didn't know the identities of the drivers, or we were afraid of ecological disasters. That's insane. It shows you, Andrew, that nobody's really serious about this war. We're only doing enough to say that we're doing something. And Obama talked about being contained. It talked about it again today about containment, even as General Dunford was saying that we haven't achieved containment. But the whole debate as to whether or not they're contained or not is irrelevant. The strategy, at least the announced strategy of the United States, is not to contain ISIS. It's to degrade and destroy ISIS.
Exactly.
And we're not doing either one of those two things. We're not containing them either. But what we're doing isn't sufficient. And Dianne Feinstein said that loud and clear about, was it 2 weeks ago or was it last week? Dianne Feinstein said, what we're doing is not sufficient. We have to be doing more. Hillary Clinton gets on CBS News this morning and says, I can't conceive of a condition that would argue to send American ground troops into Syria and Iraq to fight ISIS. Really? Can't even conceive of a condition where that might take place.
Yeah, well, that's off the table for her.
Yeah.
Well, I don't expect General Dunford to defy the commander in
No,
chief
no, I don't
publicly.
either.
However, when people, highly respected and skilled people like Robert Gates and General Flynn, who was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency until last summer, when they come out and say that the White House doesn't listen to the military because people like Joe Biden are constantly whispering in Obama's ear, don't believe them, they're trying to play you.
Yeah.
Uh, and then Obama sends in, all due respect, but he sends in a measly 50 special ops guys to Syria. Uh,
Or they spend $500
what?
million training 60 guys, 50 of whom get
Yeah,
killed.
yeah,
Yeah.
and or desert, and Obama sending these guys in. Now, this is, to my mind, a fundamental betrayal of a commander in chief's trust is to send military people into harm's way when you don't believe in what you're doing. And clearly, Obama does not believe in what he's doing. He believes in playing the next news cycle. He believes in running out the clock
Yep.
for another 415 days. He does not believe in the war. And or in really defeating ISIS. So the whole thing is a very depressing mess, and I don't know why anybody's still listening.
Well, thank you for joining us, folks. Apparently,
Yeah, hello, Ed. Are you there?
hello.
I'm sorry.
I hear you breathing out there.
I'm on my high horse today. I apologize.
No, that's why. This is what we have you on for. Don't apologize for it. We want the passionate Andrew Malcolm,
The passionate, yeah.
the passionate prince, the passionate prince. That's what.
The PP, the passionate.
The passionate prince. All right, we got a few minutes before we do. We're going to do a round of. We're going to do a lightning round today, folks. So get your
Okay.
questions ready because Andrew's with us for 60 minutes today.
Yep.
Before David Limbaugh comes on to talk about his new
Whether
book.
you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, and whether Andrew can stand it or not.
Andrew's going to do it until he gets it right.
There you go. There you go. There's another story that popped up today, and when I saw this, I thought of you, and not just because you are, of course, the media guru for the Ed Morrissey show. I mean, I'm serious. I mean,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, you are. You're the media guru, and we talk about this quite a bit. I saw this from Chris Cillizza over at the Washington Post. Does good work over there. Chris does, and I saw this headline, and the headline itself. This is one of those things where the headline just basically tells you the whole story. Why the fight between the Washington Post and New York Times over traffic is stupid. And I'm not sure that Chris actually gets all the reasons why it's stupid into one article, but it probably would take more than that. But here's the setup, Andrew. And the reason why I say this, because it reminds me a little bit of a story that you told me once. And I think
Okay.
you've told the audience this, but it's worth bringing up again. In October, more people visited the Washington Post than visited the New York Times, about 1.1 million more, which is a big deal because
Yeah, that's huge.
the Times actually has been the market leader in terms of newspaper, online newspaper traffic. And so now the Post is calling itself America's new publication of record. And the Times, and it says the Times offered little formal response, but the take from its reporters amounted to a collective eye roll, tied to a belief that the Post's traffic successes were and are primarily based on massaging social media algorithms and producing clickbait content that has no real news value beyond piling up traffic. Now, these guys aren't doing cat videos, okay? This is,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
you may think that a lot of the stuff that the Post is tweeting out and is putting up there is lighter content. I actually don't think that that's the case, and Chris Cillizza makes a pretty good defense of the Post vis-a-vis the New York Times in terms of this so-called clickbait content. They're both doing it, right? They're both doing it. But I remember that when you were a blogger at the Los Angeles Times, you're doing a great job.
They were
there.
routinely number 2 and 3, by the way. They were ahead of the Washington Post. I don't know what it is now, but
I doubt that they're there.
But when the Japanese, when Japan had its tsunami, They did 19 million overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a huge. They're emphasizing the local now, which I think is a shame. But there's a huge foreign audience that knows LATimes.com. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I remember you having a conversation with an editor
Yeah.
about your blog on the Los Angeles
Yeah.
Times, and this
Yeah.
is when I first met Andrew. Was when he was blogging at the Los Angeles Times, and it was, quite frankly, one of the only, besides the Dodgers, was really the only reason to go over the Los Angeles Times at all.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, we were having a meeting, and I was writing top of the ticket, the politics blog there, and I was being told make it conservative, so I did, and we were. There were others involved, of course. We were being quite successful, and they had me sitting in on news meetings for the national desk, and which was in charge at the time, and one of the assistant national editors, who I should add is no longer there, he said to me, "You mean you would actually write and post an item just because you knew it would attract readers?" I swear to God, that's a direct quote. And I
wait,
said,
I'm doing my shocked face.
yeah, right. And I said, you bet your sweet ass, John. We did over 4.5 million page views last month. How's the Sunday circulation going? And there was dead silence, and the nationalists said, "Well, let's not get off track here." But but it was revealing of an attitude. Now that changed even while I was there somewhat, but it was revealing of an attitude that editors at major newspapers, including the ones we're talking about, have until recently thought of themselves. I liken it to being pharmacists. The guys with the white coats on, and they've got the degree in news. And every night they arrange the news, and they pick what's going to be news. And you show up at the counter in the morning, and they dispense your daily dose of news.
Sounds like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, actually.
Yeah, right.
Look how well that worked out.
Yeah. And, of course, now there's 150 people out in the parking lot doing their own version of news. And they're telling stories much more interesting. You can still go through major metropolitan newspapers today, or I could go through it with you. And I could show you the stories that are published in the paper that were assigned or okayed and written solely to show that the editor and that reporter were working yesterday. Not because there was any thought process involved of, do people want to know this? Do people need to know this? Is it really that interesting given the balance? Now, they're always making choices and balances, and that's fine. And you can argue over the choices and the balances. But they are still making choices based on, as the news pharmacist here, what do we want to publish? And the reality is that in most major metropolitan dailies now, I don't know about the New York Times, but certainly the LA Times, the news that you get tomorrow morning on your driveway is older than the news you see on the 6 o'clock news tonight.
Right, yeah.
So you can't compete with that with a Gutenberg business model. You just can't do that. I had a guy once, a well-known financial columnist on the LA Times, who came by my desk one day, and he said, "Boy, I would kill to have your numbers." And I said, "Well, here, I'll show you how we do it." And I sat down and showed him how you make friends online, and you get more followers on Twitter, and then you post things, and you post them differently, and you talk to people and all this stuff. And he said, "Oh, I don't have time for that shit." and I said to him, and I was half joking, I said to him, "Have you got time to be unemployed? Because it's coming, Thomas.
Yeah.
Face it, guy." And he laughed and walked off. And a few months later, he was unemployed. So I guess they were getting it. But it's so sad. And what it does is it corrodes institutions, which we all make fun of and complain about. But if you listen to the radio, as millions of Americans do on the way to work, I guarantee you 96% of what you hear talked about on the radio came from that morning's newspaper. All the talk jocks and everybody is picking up stuff from the newspaper. If we don't have solid, financially solid institutions that can invest the time and money in news, collecting news, which is very expensive, it seems simple, but it isn't, and time consuming, then our democracy, never mind the mainstream media, hashtag, our democracy is not going to function as well. It just can't. And when I went to the LA Times, as one measure, there were 1,200 people in the newsroom, and today there's under 500. I don't know how many took the latest buyout, and the same is happening at the Tribune in Chicago and other places. So. You get into this business because it's exciting, because you want to tell stories, you want to deal with people. I got in because I wanted to learn something new every day.
Yeah.
And I discovered that an awful lot of people and my colleagues in my career got into the business because they knew what meeting they were going to be in at 3:10 every day. And then when you come along and say, well, we're not having a meeting anymore. The New York Times this fall, Dean Baquet, who was my boss at one point at the LA Times, they abolished the old 5 o'clock page one meeting that everybody had to prepare for, like a graduate oral exam. I did it many times, and it's scary as hell. They abolished that because it's a rolling news day. They're making decisions all the time. And that is a fascinating story that you talk about, Chris. I'm going to have to go study that some more. It's a competition, of course, for eyeballs and for readers, and it can be gamed. The page views can be gamed with these services that you pay 1 or 2 cents for every page view that you get from them, and because you want to have enough page views to meet your guaranteed reader quota for advertisers. But I understand why the Washington Post is strong. Does this surprise anybody that the inventor of Amazon is turning the Washington Post into an online success?
No, of course not.
No. Of course, it shouldn't.
And what's interesting about that, many things that are interesting about this, but both of these guys adopted subscription models not long ago. Well, a couple of years back. They both started doing subscription models. And so if you want to get the content, you have to pay, I think it's $10 a month. In both cases, I think it's $10 a month. And they seem to be doing pretty well with that. So the subscription model does seem to work under certain circumstances.
Let me tell you something, and this just happened yesterday, now that you mention it. I got an offer online because I'm registered at the New York Times. I got an offer for the newspaper subscription, including all access online, for 50 cents a week. For a year.
Wow, really? That's pretty
good. What does that tell you? Well, it tells me that they're desperate and that they are competing with the Washington Post. Because in those numbers of how many page views you get, you're not saying we basically gave it away.
No. Well, it's true with all the circulation. A lot of the circulation.
Well, how does the Wall Street Journal work it out? They never were free.
No. But they're a niche. I mean, they do general news as well.
General news. Kim.
Good stuff.
What's her name? Kim Strassel.
Kim Strassel. Yeah, Kim Strassel does.
She's wonderful. She's one of the best people.
Good columnist
to read online.
But they have a built-in audience that's willing to pay the money, and for good reason. For most of them, it's a write-off. I mean, it's part of their job to buy the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal was always a a high price point subscription, even when everybody was just print. I mean, that was a pricey subscription. I remember when I was in college and I was taking a business course, and the professor emphasized that we really should all have Wall Street Journal subscriptions for this class. And it was one of the things that we were expected to do. So I actually had home delivery of the Wall Street Journal for a couple of months. And I couldn't believe, I forget what the cost was now, but it was so extraordinary that I couldn't believe that anybody would actually do it. And this is on the West Coast too, right? So
yeah.
I think it was probably printed by the Times, or
Well, I
print
think
shop.
the Wall Street Journal is all the concerns about what Murdoch would do to the Wall Street Journal. I think it's
think
an
they've done
amazing
fine.
institution. Do you remember that wonderful joke? And I'm going to forget some of them, but about who reads which newspaper?
Oh, yeah, something about that.
So the Boston Herald is read by people who used to run the government.
True.
The
very
New
true,
York
yeah.
the New York Times is read by people who think they should run the government.
Yeah.
The New York Daily News and the New York Post is run by people who don't give a damn who runs the government. The Wall Street Journal is run by people who really do run the government. The Los Angeles Times is read by people who would run the government if they didn't have to leave California. And the Miami Herald is read by people who used to run a government in another country.
Very nicely done.
Yeah, I just love that one. Because it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It is. All right. That leads us to, I don't know if anybody heard that, but that was the thunder sound, because we're going to do the lightning round. Okay, good. Okay, it came across. That means that we are entering the lightning round, where you ask us questions in the chat room, and Andrew and I respond with...
Oh, it's called pithy?
It's never called pithy, but we make that claim anyway. Whenever we do the lightning round, we take your questions and we promise to keep it short and punchy, and we just end up looking punchy ourselves. But that's okay. All you have to do is put a Q, space, and question mark, and your question in, and we'll see your question. First question comes to us from Jeff Dunitz. Now, you have to understand that there is a story going around the internet today that started with Matt Drudge. Matt Drudge is reported early this morning. Apparently, it's not true, but he reported that Leonardo DiCaprio, in his new movie, The Revenant, which is based on a true story, is raped by a bear in the movie.
Okay.
And so Jeff Dunitz asked, do you think Leonardo DiCaprio is going to do any more animal movies? He's king of the world. Actually, I mean, I don't know. There's two sources now that say that that's not true. He gets mauled by the bear, but that's the extent of it. It's just a non-sexual mauling. It's the story of Hugh Glass, who was a 19th century trapper who was pretty viciously mauled by a bear, was left for dead by his companions, and turned out to have survived, and goes after the people who abandoned him. And in real life, he finds them, but he either forgives them or just puts aside his revenge. Jim Bridger was one of the people that...
Jimmy.
Yeah, who
I
abandoned
loved
him.
that story of Jim Bridger. There was a Random House had a series of books called Landmark, and they were about American heroes in institutions. Pony Express, Kit Carson, Buffalo Bill, and Jim Bridger was one of them. I love the stories about Jim Bridger.
Well, I mean, he doesn't come across very well in this, because he was a teenager at the time, and he's one of the people that ran off, and that Hugh Glass was looking for when he was able to get well enough to travel again. But he did end up forgiving Bridger, because Bridger was a teenager, and he apparently felt that Bridger was just too frightened, and that was what the issue was.
Yeah, called self-protection.
Well, yeah. I mean, they were in an area with hostile Native American tribes, and which was part of the issue anyway. But yeah, the The movie, the rumor du jour was that Leonardo DiCaprio gets raped by the bear twice in this film.
Oh, why am I laughing? But yeah, those bears, you don't. They're in Montana. You don't fool around with them. People wear little Christmas bells on their hiking shoe laces so that the critters can hear you coming and go away. Because one thing you don't want to do is surprise a bear. Surprise bears. When I was there working for the governor, there was a guy with a video camera who surprised a mommy bear and her baby. And the last video on the camera was the mommy bear's mouth coming at the guy, and he passed away.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what happened with Hugh Glass. Is that he disturbed the cubs, and the mother came running after him, which is the reason why on Twitter earlier, and then I put it up in a post later. I said, well, that would be really a neat trick, because it was a female bear that actually mauled Hugh Glass, the character that DiCaprio's playing.
Of course, Ed catching it. Yes.
Yeah.
The physical anomaly.
Yeah, well, I
have to correct myself. When we were talking about newspapers before I forget, and I said that the Miami Herald is read by people who used to run another government. That's part of it. What the whole thing is, the Miami Herald is read by people who used to run another country's government, but still want the U.S. baseball box scores.
And then Monster added one, which I think is actually pretty good. The New Republic is read by people who think another country should be running the country.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty good, Monster. All right. Next question up is Juanito Cabron wants to know if this bear rape story was reported by Rolling Stone. No, actually, no. Let's see.
You guys, you have probably the best, most erudite crowd of chatizens there. They're on the ball all the time.
Well, they're on the ball, but I mean, they're kind of obsessed with this story because all of the questions now are about this Leonardo DiCaprio bear.
Stupid bear.
Doesn't anybody have a substantive question that you can toss? Just maybe a trivia question that will stump the hosts. But come on, guys. Why are you forcing bears into your patriarchal gender roles? Yes, Cranky T-Rex.
By the way, did you read yesterday that actually I think it was a Washington Post story about the New York Times that they've added a new honorific? This is serious. Not serious. It's not fake. The New York Times is really rigid about Mr. and Ms. and
Yes.
Doctor, and it's Dr. Jill Biden, even though she isn't. And the New York Times rule used to be you have to be a medical doctor. So as a reporter, if you were quoting somebody and they were a doctor, you had to find out, are they really an MD? And I can remember wasting so much time, hours sometimes, trying to find out whether a woman I interviewed was married, whether I could call her Mrs. or Miss. And I finally sent a note to the style guru at the Times. I said, how long are we going to keep on with this crap of ignore? That was in the days when the New York Times refused to use Ms. And so actually 2 days, it wasn't because of me, but 2 days later they went for Ms. Well, now the New York Times has gone for, and I don't know how you say it, but MZ instead of MS, MZ. And MZ is to be applied to people who do not want to be defined by their gender.
This is a reason why last name references actually work every place else other than the New York Times. Morrissey said, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Malcolm said, blah, 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 blah. That works just fine. And then you don't have to worry about Dr., Mr., Ms.
And if you got people, as seems to me to be happening a lot recently, who have names that are not gender specific. I mean, Linda is pretty much guaranteed to be a woman. That in Spanish, that's pretty. But there are names that are not used gender specific, or that are misused if you're associating a particular. It's a parent naming a kid; they can name them anything they want. But names that are boys' names that are put on girls, and not so much the other way. So what I always do is I always make sure I mention two of them, and then I can say they. I don't have to say she.
All right, so we
A
do have a
little
couple of
trick.
other questions other than Leo DiCaprio bear questions here. Is the prospect of multiple 5-17s going to a college bowl game a travesty?
Yeah.
There's so many bowl games, right? It would be much
Well,
better if they just
actually,
had a
there was a
playoff
story.
system.
There was a story this weekend that the whatever it's called, the bowl committee was considering. I don't know whether they'll do it or not because there's so much money involved, but was considering allowing some bowls to pass up this year and not have a game. Some of the minor bowls because there were so many 5 and 6 and 5 and 7 teams that it wouldn't be competitive.
You know, there was a time in college football where coaches actually turned down bowl invitations because their record wasn't good enough and they didn't want to be in the bowl if they had a lousy record.
Hmm.
There was a time. That time is past.
Strange. That time has passed. Yeah.
Well,
Well, there's so much money. I mean, these
exactly.
guys,
It's
these
all driven by
schools like
money
the
now.
Big Ten, I don't know about the others, but the Big Ten schools can go away with 20, $25 million a year on television. You're not going to turn that down. You're going to salute, and it's Wednesday. ESPN and ABC typically, well, it depends on the league conference, but they get their choice of first games, and that doesn't happen till Wednesday. So that's why when you go in to set your DVR to tape certain games, um, it just says to be announced because not until Wednesday do the networks get to pick who's going to be their primetime game, and the games will be changed. I mean, when I was in college, every game was Saturday afternoon, right? And now it's at nighttime because they want to have a good national audience. So that's why Notre Dame is often playing at night because of their national audience on Saturday night. Or Thursday night. I happen to. You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I happen to have shifted my interest away from pro football to college ball, and not just any college ball, but certain parts of the country college ball, and it's a lot more fun. You don't get the showboating and the tattoos and the oh, wait a
Oh,
minute,
come
why
on.
isn't that guy
Come on,
still
Andrew.
in prison?
Come on,
Uh,
Andrew. We know the reason for this is the Cleveland Browns, who
oh
found
no, well yeah, I gave up on them. When was that? 98, 97 when they left.
when they packed up and left. Yeah.
Yeah,
They found a new way to lose
it's
last night.
really sad. It's really sad.
They found a new way to lose last night. Did you watch last night's game?
I did, sadly. It's just pathetic. It was like the Michigan State Michigan game. Where on the last play you get something blocked and it changes the course of the game. Yeah, it's too bad. The quality. I don't know. I guess it's the quality of people involved. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I've hung around pro football. I've hung around college football. It's not. Neither one is innocent. I don't mean to say it that way because football is a tough sport and it's built on intimidation. That's one reason why it's so popular. But on Sunday, I don't watch any particular team, but the NFL in certain packages has its red zone channel. I don't know if you watch this, but
No.
it's not any game. The red zone channel, and HBO does one too, is every single scoring play and all of the eye-popping plays that happen each day. And it's 7 hours long, and there are no commercials. And the guy said sometimes they'll show 4 games at once on the screen, sometimes 2, sometimes 1, and they'll come in and say, "Oh, okay, Pittsburgh is now in the red zone, so we're going to go there." And you watch a play, but then there's a TV timeout, so they switch away to the Miami game, and they show you what just happened, this amazing catch. And it's all highlights. And at the end of the day, I couldn't tell you who did it. But in terms of watching football, I only played in college, but in terms of, I mean, in high school, but in terms of enjoying football and enjoying the physical demands and accomplishments in that game, it's the cream of the cream, right? And you
Right.
don't get the timeouts, you don't get all the butt slapping, you don't get all the showboat stuff. Oh, you got like you sack somebody and that's like you won the Super Bowl. You
Yeah.
know, act like it's happened before. Just play the damn game. So anyway, that's my thing. So and the college, you do get the exuberance, but you don't, which is fine. But you don't get. I don't look at them and go,
You don't get the
oh,
planned dances, the planned.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
showboat and the pointing to the stands and the hip movements. Jeez,
All right. Well,
it's just so sad. Anyway, what's the next question?
we got one last opportunity for Piff here.
Okay.
We have to ask you first. This is actually a pretty good question. From, and now I gotta find it because it's okay. Here we go. From Manifesto, who's still with us in the chat room. Good. Are Rubio and Cruz counting chickens by going after each other rather than Carson Trump? I understand why they're doing it because they want to make themselves the alternative to the neophytes, but I think it's a mistake. I think they'd be better off taking aim at the top people rather this far into it. I think you got to start manning up and taking your shots. I'm a little curious as to why both campaigns decided that it was time to go after each other rather than go after Trump or Carson. But Andrew, what's your
I think you're absolutely right. They are setting themselves up as number 3, counting on the top 2 fading. And why waste your ammo on people that you're pretty sure are going to fade one way or another? I think Ben Carson, he went to the Middle East over Thanksgiving. So that's supposed to give him foreign policy credibility. So I know I'm not putting any time limit on it, but I don't think Trump is going to be the nominee for Republicans. And if you look at the polls, it's Rubio, not Cruz, that is consistently the second choice. So if your guy loses, who do you like? And it's Rubio. So we'll see. There's another debate coming up, but Trump is threatening again to boycott if CNN doesn't give $5 million today on Giving Tuesday to somebody, to veterans groups. It's anything.
Yeah.
This is like the NFL. It's showboat. It's got nothing to do with becoming president.
No, I agree.
Entertainment.
We've only got about 2 minutes left
Okay.
here, so we need the jokes
Okay,
of the week. Here.
we need to know the jokes. Okay, fine. Well, we've got Jimmy Fallon, who said that Mark Zuckerberg has announced he's taking 2 months paternity leave after his first child is born here in the near future. And that marks the very first time that anyone's had a baby and tried to avoid Facebook. And Seth Meyers, this is before Thanksgiving, Seth Meyers said a new poll says that 54% of Americans agree it's too early to be playing Christmas music. I couldn't agree more. So now let's talk about the 2016 presidential race.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, excuse me, Jimmy Fallon said, Hillary Clinton announced that Sting will perform at a fundraiser for Hillary next month. Hillary says she's been a huge Sting fan ever since he agreed to perform at next month's fundraiser.
Goes
The
way
one
back.
other one that's good, it was this Seth Meyers. He said there's a new study out that finds that specially trained pigeons have an 85% accuracy detecting breast cancer in humans. Apparently that's true. But he says, which means that 15% of the time is just a pigeon staring at your boobs.
Okay,
Anyway,
there you go.
well, I got to listen to David talk about his book. I just got it, and I'm looking forward to digging into it, and I can't wait to hear you two talk.
All right. Well, Andrew Malcolm, of course, investors.com/Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter at AH Malcolm. All hail the Prince. And we'll have you back on next Tuesday, Andrew. Same
Okay.
bat time, same bat channel.
Okay, buddy. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Andrew Malcolm, my co-host and partner in crime du jour. I need to find, let's see. Well, let's see if we can get David Limbaugh on the line. I am thinking that he has not double checked that, but we'll see what happens here.
Hello.
Hello, is this David Limbaugh?
Yes.
Hi, it's Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you? Are you on video or just audio?
Well, I'll be audio only, but if you send me your video, it'll go out to the rest of the audience. My audio goes out to the video streaming thing. So we're on the air right now, but I'm my own producer. You know, this is what I do for a living, David. I play around and I fire myself every week, but then I look around and nobody else will do this job.
Well, I don't know how do we do this where it is video? Or do you just want to, because I can't.
There should be if you highlight there, you should see a little camera. It might have a null line through it. It looks like you just clicked it. There you go.
Yeah.
We're good. David Limbaugh
right.
is with us here, author of the Emmaus Code. What did I do with the book? It's right here. The Emmaus Code. I've got the book cover on the screen as well, but I'll hold up the book.
Okay.
Finding Jesus in the Old Testament. And, I mean, this is... I love this topic, David, because as a Christian, I firmly believe that Jesus is foreshadowed in the Old Testament and that he's revealed in the New Testament. And so I'm thrilled that you have this book coming up, but you mean this for more than just biblical exegesis here. You're talking about how to apply this knowledge in the current time and with our current state of affairs here in America and in the rest of the world.
Well, as I told the PR people, they send the PR releases saying that the book is about the society, but truthfully, the book's totally about biblical, about theology in the Old Testament, and Christ in the Old Testament. It has nothing to do with society. But of course, we can draw lessons from it about the culture, as we can draw lessons from any other Christian book, but just so as to not mislead the audience here. Now, the book is strictly about the Bible.
Well, okay, that's great. And see, this is a good lesson for me, David. Never trust a publicist.
Well, I told them today to specifically contact you since I saw how you promoted it on your website and to tell you that it wasn't, and they said they did.
I haven't gotten the email on it yet, but I'm sure it's in my email box. It's fine. It's fine. And I'm actually glad because that's really the topic I wanted to explore.
Yeah, I think they have this fear that if you don't tie it to the culture, you won't get interviews. And what's the point of getting interviews if you're not going to talk about what the book's about?
Yeah,
so I just soon not get interviews if they have to be about something that it isn't. I mean, I don't want to misrepresent what the book is.
Right. No. And by the way, anytime you want to come on my show, David, you are more than welcome to come on my show. So
thank you.
We love talking with you. Okay, so let's talk about the consonants between the Old Testament and the New Testament. You know, I do a reflection every week on Hot Air, just totally non-political. In fact, I emphasize the fact that I'm not going to talk about politics in these threads. So very similar to the approach that you're taking in this book. And I look at the readings for the day, and that's the readings that are coming out of the Catholic lectionary for the day, and just give my thoughts on that. And I find myself a lot of times talking about how the Old Testament reading for the day really does reveal much more about the New Testament reading that we're going through. New Testament reading and the Gospel reading that we're going to go through today. And in fact, I find sometimes that the Old Testament reading really is almost It's almost indispensable for understanding what's being said in the gospel. And that happens over and over and over again. And so this type of approach, I think, there's so much fruit that can bear from it.
That is so true. And it's interesting. You Catholics deserve some credit because the way you arrange your service, as I understand it, is to have an Old Testament scripture that is, and a New Testament scripture and a psalm, and they're all tied together substantively. And I find that fascinating because that's the way I like to approach the Bible. The Old Testament is given short shrift by some Christians, and I don't know about Catholics. I can't speak to Catholics or to Lutherans who have both emailed me and said, "Hey, your book is not a new idea. We've been teaching this in the Catechism for hundreds of years." And I replied, "No, it's not. It doesn't purport to be a new idea. But if I'm plagiarizing anybody, it's Jesus, because he's the one who told the disciples on the Emmaus Road how the entire Old Testament pointed to him. So it comes directly from him. So we don't have to speculate. It's not something that we made up. Now, this book goes into the different ways, the different Christ themes and threads and foreshadowings that course throughout the Old Testament. And, we can reconstruct the things that Christ might have said, but we don't have to speculate because we look at the Old Testament through our New Testament lenses. At least 10% of the New Testament is either allusions or direct references to the Old Testament. And plus, the rest of it bears on the Old Testament. Is all an integrated book. The Old Testament is every bit as inspired as the New Testament. It's the only Bible that Jesus had and used. And it has not been superseded by the New Testament. It is still Scripture. It shows us our need for the gospel. It's foundational. It's like part one of a 2-act play. I can't say enough to validate your intro there about how meaningful the Old Testament is and how important it is as foundational to the New Testament, individual scriptures or as a whole.
It's interesting that you say that. And first off, I guess I got to react to people who are telling you that, well, this isn't a new approach. I mean, the Bible's been around the printed Bible's been around for 600 years. The handwritten Bibles have been around for 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. It's not. There's a lot of things that aren't the first time. That doesn't mean that there isn't value in taking a look at something from a particular angle or from a particular source. I just find that I'm struck by how uncharitable that is.
It's amazing, But I've always been so taken with the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament. I came to Christianity kicking and screaming, and as I chronicled in my book Jesus on Trial, which was the spiritual journey that I went through, and also an apologetics book, Defense of the Faith. This book is a study of the Old Testament, an overview of the Old Testament, a primer, and I go through each book of the Bible and summarize of the Old Testament and summarize it, and then specifically go on to show how each one prefigures, foreshadows, or prophesies Christ. And then I also have two chapters where I outline Old Testament history because I find it very helpful. Ed, this book is, and I was telling Rush this, it finally dawned on me, the best way to describe this, what this book means to me. It is the book I wish I had when I was first trying to get my teeth sunk into the Bible. When I first became a Christian, when I realized through the Messianic prophecies and other studies, other biblical readings, that this was actually the Word of God I was holding in my hand, it was overwhelming. It was an overwhelming epiphany. And I then was on fire for the Bible and theology, and I read as much as I could, but I was frustrated because I couldn't acquire knowledge fast enough. In any other field of discipline, you want to get to a certain point. And I quote my law school professor, Grant Nelson, who's still around, by the way, teaching at Pepperdine. He's awesome. He told us, I may have put this wrong in the book because I said it was a second year. It may have been the third year class when he told us this. It was in the remedies class, I think. And he said, this is a great time. This is a great class I'm teaching. You guys are in a great period in your law school career because you're now seeing how all the law fits together. And I analogize that in this book to the Bible. Once you get once you learn enough about the flow, the grand sweep of Old Testament history, and how the Old Testament redemptive themes lead forward and anticipate Christ, and then they're actually fulfilled in the New Testament, you just have such a more meaningful understanding of the whole book, and your faith grows commensurately. And so, the book, there's so many different threads. There's typology, where persons, places, and things are types of things that will come in types of Christ in the New Testament, like the Passover and all that, pointing to Christ, and the Exodus, all the different things. You have the Christophanies, which were pre-incarnate appearances of Christ before he became a man, when he was born in the New Testament time. And you have the covenants. And I won't keep rambling, but the covenants are what really get me, how all the covenants point to Christ and are fulfilled in Christ. There's so many different Christ threads. Oh, I know what I was going to say, and I got to close this circle. I read all these different books, and even including my research for this book. There's all kinds of books about Christ in the Old Testament. And I was thinking, I was researching this, well, maybe I don't have anything to add. When I wanted to write this book desperately, but maybe I don't have anything to add. But then when I looked at all of them, not one of them was as comprehensive as I wanted to do. And so in this book, I tried to get every last one of the Christ threads, the offices of prophet, priest, and king in the Old Testament that were fulfilled in Christ, the prophecies, all of it. I wanted to cover all of it beyond a superficial level without making it be 1,000 words, 1,000 pages. And the last thing I'll say, we started this, Harry Crocker at Regner, we started this with the idea I'm going to do the whole Bible, the Christ-centeredness of the whole Bible. It's counterintuitive as to the Old Testament. It's obvious as to the New. But once I started doing it, there was no way I could have a manageable book writing the whole Bible. So then maybe we'll do the New Testament next time. So. Hello?
Sorry about that. I lost my microphone for a moment. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah. Was I still on?
No, you were fine. My microphone had an issue.
I was rambling. Sorry about that. But
it's great. No. This is, believe me, it's the passion that you have for this book, I think, that is one of the features of this book, and it's not difficult to see why. Again, this is a type of it really is a compelling. It's a compelling part of faith is to gain knowledge in faith, and
yes,
we talk a lot. Christians, we talk a lot about the simplicity of faith. Come to us. Come to Jesus as a small child.
Yes.
Put your trust in Jesus, and absolutely. But as thinking, reasoning beings, as God created us, there is something that we want to have feed our reason as well as our heart, and
so true.
And that is the Bible. I mean, that really is the Bible. I mean, it really wouldn't be that difficult to just tell one of the gospel stories in a very simple mode and say, okay, now go out as children and believe. Sure, fine, but the whole path of salvation from the beginning to Revelation is laid out through all of the Bible, and it's laid out there for a reason. It's for us to be able to put the faith of our heart into Jesus Christ, but also to put our reason and intellect into that, and to have that type of study. You go back to Jesus's time, and what did they do? To this day, they went to the synagogues, they looked at the scriptures, they analyzed them, they tried to drill through them to figure out, in this context, what does this mean? How does this relate to that? I mean, this is a tradition that goes back a very, very 3,500 years, right? It goes back that far, and I think it's one of the most rewarding efforts that one can make is to put that much effort into understanding God's word. I'm reminded, David. I'm sure you've seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah, long time ago, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a number of times, and there was this one point in the song, "If I Were a Rich Man," where the music slows and he talks about if he was a rich man, he would be able to do nothing but study the Word of God all day long, and that would be the sweetest thing of all.
You
And
know,
that to me is
being
what,
a person that doesn't listen much to lyrics, I didn't even realize that. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that was in there, and I know the song. Just never pay much attention.
well, when you have to dance to it in high school, we actually did the play in high school, so you kind of have to listen to the words, and so there you go. But that to me is that's the passion that I'm sensing from you in this project.
Oh, when I say on fire, I'm telling you on fire now. Now, that happened to me. I had my own Emmaus Road epiphany because, as I said, I came to belief through the Old Testament, through the Messianic prophecies and all that. But so I began 25 years ago with a book about the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament, and it's proof of it is in the title. I titled it "Roadmap to the Cross," and I wrote the first 3 chapters, which were Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, half of Leviticus. I submitted it to some friends, and they really thought it was good or were humoring me. But I sent it to an agent, a Christian agent, and he said, it's too highfalutin for a person that has no credentials, and you don't have credentials, so you can't write for scholars. So I go, bummer. So now, six books later and about 1,700 columns, I have a little bit of a platform, had a little more confidence to try this out, and I also established myself a little bit in the genre with Jesus on Trial. I thought,
Right.
Okay, let's revisit that. Actually, I don't remember if Harry Crocker came up with this idea or if I did this time around, but I didn't pick up the old book that I started, but I used that. No, I'm just saying it's kind of cool that I revisited that same exact theme, the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament, and now that's what this book is about. Because the purpose of the title is, or the meaning behind the title, the Emmaus Code. Now that was actually their idea too. Play on words, I guess. You know, these publishers, they are very sharp at marketing. And I guess the idea of the Da Vinci Code, kind of a play on word. But to me, it struck me because the Emmaus Road experience was when Christ revealed himself, how he was in the scriptures to the 2 disciples.
Absolutely.
And the Emmaus Code is the key to unlocking all of the Old Testament is through Christ. So he's the key or the code. I just think that I was ecstatic when they came up with that title. And then when they did that cover art, I thought that was also very cool. So to me, if you see the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament, it's an amazing revelation. And, God reveals himself progressively to us. And so, as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of in shadows and in indirect forms. And you can't blame the Old Testament readers for not understanding it. He revealed himself progressively, but it becomes clear through the Old Testament, and then it's crystal clear. It's like putting on glasses for the first time, or adjusting the focus on your binoculars when you're looking through New Testament lenses, and you see how all the covenants. Ed, one of the most exciting things about when you study this, when I first became a Christian, was studying apologetics. Josh McDowell and Norman Geisler and other of these apologetics greats pointed to Genesis 3:15 as the first messianic prophecy. And I looked at that and I said, oh, come on, you guys are stretching. How do you expect to have any credibility when you stretch something that much? You have to be dreaming you have to be imagining fanciful thoughts to find Christ there. Now I think it's one of the most affirming verses there is. Right as he punishes Adam and Eve, and almost simultaneously, he gives his first promise of the gospel, called the proto-evangelium by Bible scholars or theologians, and it's also the first messianic prophecy. He says, this is where God is talking to the serpent. In Genesis 3:15, and he says to him, and the serpent represents Satan,
right.
I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now here's the cool thing. He's telling Satan that there's going to be enmity between him and the seed of the woman. And the offspring, the seed of the woman, the only person ever born of a woman and not of a man was Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit sired him. He was born of a human mother and a spiritual father. And so that's clearly a reference to Jesus Christ. And then when he says he's going to bruise your head, Christ is going to bruise Satan. Said, well, a blow to the head can be fatal, but you shall bruise his heel. Whoever dies of a heel injury. Well, Christ allows Satan to injure his heel when he goes to the cross voluntarily and dies. Now, that's a fatal blow, but it's a temporary blow because in 3 days he comes back in his resurrection glory. And in the very process of allowing Satan to bruise his heel, metaphorically, he triumphs over Satan, sin, and death by providing his substitutionary sacrifice for our sins. So to me, that right there is the first promise of the gospel. And then Genesis 12:3, he calls out Abraham and says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless you and bless all those who bless you, curse all those who curse you, form a nation out of you, and bless all nations and all people through you, and give you the land as an everlasting possession. And then you trace all these covenants through, the Mosaic covenant, the Palestinian, the Davidic, all the way through, and you see that Israel was the focus of Christ. It's like an hourglass. You start out with the entirety of humanity when creation begins. You narrow down the focus when God selects Israel, establishes Israel as his chosen nation, through whom he will mediate the gospel. He's going to make them, set aside them as a nation of priests, and then they'll mediate the gospel, and then he'll open it up to all of mankind at the end. It's an hourglass. And so now the entirety of Old Testament history, we see that focus on Israel. And we also see instructive examples of how we ought to behave toward God, what happens when we obey, what happens when we disobey. But we also learn that God is not an angry God in the Old Testament. God is changeless. He's unchanging. And he's a long-suffering, patient, gracious, and loving. No matter how much Israel disobeys, they are not going to be allowed to thwart God's salvation and redemptive plans for us. Even when they tried to commit suicide as a species, and God said he was going to wipe everyone out, he didn't. He preserved Noah and the godly line. And it happened throughout the Bible when he kicks Israel off the land through the Assyrian conquest and then the Babylonian conquest. They always come back. And guess what, Ed? They were conquered in 70 AD by the Romans, and the temple was shattered and demolished. And then in 1948, some 2,000 years later, they returned to the land. No nation has ever been separated for more than 5 generations and retained its national identity, much less its language. We have Jerusalem. We have the Jews in the Promised Land, the same exact real estate that God promised Abraham in Genesis 12:3. Now that stuff gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned unchanging God, and in this book, in fact, it starts out this book starts out with a defense of the Old Testament. And you mentioned this also a little bit earlier, the fact that people don't know the Old Testament, or they tend to overlook the Old Testament, and you hear this a lot from people say, "Well, God's different in the Old Testament," and yeah, you can read it that way, but properly understood, this is an unchanging God. And this is not an unimportant issue, by the way, in terms of theology, because there are before, I don't want to get too political on this. Let's just say that there are a number of religions that were based on the fact that of a whimsical God or whimsical gods, and that there was no order or rationality in those universes, and that you could never figure out what God was or what God wanted, because God or the gods could change their mind at any time. This is an unchanging God unfolding a plan of salvation for a very recalcitrant family. I mean,
yes.
And so, yeah, I think it's critical that people understand that about the Old Testament, and that it is an integrated part of the entire Bible. Absolutely.
And he had reasons for commanding the Israelites to completely remove the Canaanites from the land. It wasn't for his sake. It wasn't because he's a sadistic God. It was because in order for him to effectuate his salvation plan, he had to keep Israel as pure as it could possibly be in human terms anyway. And he knew that if they didn't, the first 2 commandments, love the Lord your God only and don't go after other gods. That's not because he's got some human type of characteristic, egomania. It's because he knows he built us for a relationship with him. And to the extent that the way we prosper, the way we are happy, is to have that relationship with him and not whoring after other gods. To the extent that they allowed the Canaanites to remain in the land, and they did, they became their own gods instead of listening to God. They did corrupt them, and they pursued idols, and that resulted in to their detriment. So God was doing it not for himself, but for them. God doesn't need us. He wants us. He loves us. We need him. So it's absurd for us to impute our human characteristics to a perfect God. But the God of the New Testament, by the way, the triune God, and as we see, of course, mostly in Jesus Christ in the New Testament, is also not some secular, hyper-tolerant hippie who doesn't pass judgment on anyone. He probably talks about hell more than he talks about anything else. He issues a moral code. He expounds a moral code in the Sermon on the Mount that is impossible to live up to. Now, he's not a person / God that is indifferent to sin. That's what he's all about. And so these secular depictions of Christ as someone who is apathetic and all he cares about is tiptoeing through the tulips and being loving is just absurd. It's another bastardization of something that's good and pure. Christ is not indifferent to sin. He wants us to abide in him, to have faith in him, so that we can rely on him, his substitutionary sacrifice for us.
Well, David, I mean, this is it's fantastic. I can't tell you how much I really enjoy this type of discussion, and I know the book has got so much more in it. We could spend all day unpacking this, but I'd rather people buy it, frankly.
I appreciate that.
The David Limbaugh, The Emmaus Code. Now, this is available both in hardbound as well as on Kindle, and I think there's an Audible version of this too. Am I correct about that?
That's what they tell me. Yes, so, I haven't seen it yet.
But you can go to Amazon. The link is in the show post, and you could go to David's site, by the way, davidlimbaugh.com.
Actually, no, because that's under revision. I don't even think I have the book promoted on the site.
Oh,
so
well, then don't do that.
Get that. By the way, if you got any ideas for webmasters, let me know off air, because I need to get my site rebuilt.
Yeah, actually, I think I might have a couple of ideas about that.
Excellent.
Let me poke around a little bit and see what I can find out. But I think we might have one or two in the audience that might be interested
awesome.
in doing some.
Well, you guys do
work.
such a great job on yours, and
we got a great
something.
team at Hot Air. I mean, that's it's with the 3 or 4 of us fumbling around in it all the time. We're always breaking things, so they're pretty good about fixing our little mistakes and keeping things going. So yeah, definitely. Well, you've got my email address. Let me see if I can find somebody good, and I'll refer them over to you. But David's also on Twitter at David Limbaugh. So if you're not following him already, you should be. And again, do you have a website for the book itself? Is there a promotional website for the book?
Well, Regnery.
Oh, Regnery. Yeah.
But mainly Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Costco. All those places sell the book. So, yeah, I don't know.
Go to the bookstore. Buy it old school, folks. Go to the bookstore. Get it right in your hand right there. That'd be great. David, thanks so much for being with us, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing here. And mostly, I just appreciate the passion that you're putting into this. It's great to see. Well,
thank you so much for having me on. It's not often when you get to talk about these kinds of subjects, especially on a mostly political show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
My pleasure. I can't tell you how much fun I had doing this segment, David. So thanks again for being with us.
Thank you. You're a good friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. David Limbaugh has been my guest. I love this stuff. I mean, you guys know this. I do the Sunday Reflections every week. I love this stuff. That's exactly what I'm going for. He's got like a whole book of this stuff that I am usually trying to go for, and probably does it so much better. So yeah, go out and buy the book. It's that's awesome. Good for him. I think that's awesome. Too bad Fausta took off. I would have mentioned her on the way out, but it's been great having everybody. Now, I should warn you that I'm actually traveling on Thursday, so there's no show on Thursday. I'm actually doing the Bullets and Bourbon thing. That's the thing that's been at the bottom of the show post for like the last several months. I think a few of you may have signed up through the show. If not, I'll get to meet everybody else's fans at the Bullets and Bourbon thing. I'm actually probably not going to do a whole lot of shooting. I'm going to take my camera, and I think I'm going to do some shooting with my camera more than anything else. But I do know that I am hosting the golf range thing. So I get a chance to go out there and swing a golf club and meet people. It's going to be great. But I'm traveling Thursday to that. It goes Friday, Saturday, and then I'm coming back on Sunday. And then we'll be back next week, Tuesday, Thursday, just the same as always. Week after that, the Tuesday is the debate. So Andrew might be out there for that. I think he was talking about it. So if he's out there and I'm out there, I might just set up the laptop to do the show off the web page without the music and the fancy stuff. And Andrew and I might just sit there and do a debate prep. So that's the next few cycles of the Ed Morrissey Show laid out for you in living color. But we're going to do what we can do. So no show on Thursday. We'll be back a week from today with Andrew and a couple of other guests. We're still working on that. And Conservative Liberal Hands says, hi, Ed. So hi back. All right, I want to thank the folks in the chat room today, as well as David Limbaugh and Andrew Malcolm for being my guests today. Cranky T-Rex from buzzpo.com, sometimes at hotair.com. You can find him at Cranky T-Rex and at crankytrex.blogspot.com. That's his personal blog where you can find all the stuff that he's working on. Thank him very much for his hard work. He does a lot of work here to make sure that the chat room is up and running. Monster's with us, back in the groove here with us. e3gazette.blogspot.com. He's on Twitter at Sum Ergo Monstro. And so that should be a lot of fun to follow him. It always is. And what you have to do, the way that you have to follow Monster is every once in a while you have to throw out something that's grammatically incoherent. Because that's when Monster really gets engaged. I'm just a troublemaker. All right, let's play a little... If I give Cranky, we could do a Not the Ed Morrissey Show on Thursday, Cranky. If you'd like to do that, I'm fine with that. I don't know if you want to give it a try. And I know that CILH is a web design guy, so send me an email on that CILH. That's who I was thinking about. Send me an email. You know, you've got my email address, and if not. DM Cranky and he can get it to you. He knows my email address. I don't want to put it on the broadcast. So let's see. There you go. There you are. CILH. Look at your private message. Do not taunt the grammar Nazi. And for me and for Cranky T-Rex, you throw out something movie related. Oh, I should mention we both saw Creed and we both liked it. It's really a good movie, and we both agreed on that. So we're gonna have to watch some other movie and figure out something. So, all right, let me play a little walking music here, get us on the road. And by the way, don't forget to buy my book, Going Red, or pre-order my book, I should say, Going Red, coming out in April 2016. Latest on that, I just got the first galleys electronically, and it looks cool. Let's face it. This is cool. So I know a handful of you have already pre-ordered the books. You can pre-order the book. You can pre-order the Audible version of it. You can pre-order the Kindle. It will be delivered to you on time as the book comes out if you do that. I'll be traveling around at some point in time, so maybe I'm coming out your way and I can sign books at that point in time. But yeah, I like the pre-order thing. I was having a lot of fun with the numbers on that, but let's just say I'm not in John Grisham territory yet, but we're still 5 months away from the book coming out too. So there you go. All right, let's play a little walking music. Like I said, first off, let me kill that. Let's play a little walking music and go out with, let's see. It's hard for me to hear this, the way I've got it set up. There we go. All right. Oh, I mean for you and Andrew remotely, since you may not have the bandwidth for it. Yes, that might actually work better. Let's talk about that for the 15th. That might be a good idea. He's out there. That's what I'd like to do. All right. Who else has been in the chat room? Don't forget to put your URLs and your Twitter handles in the chat room. We're all about shameless blog promotion here at the Ed Morrissey Show. Conservative and Liberal Hands. Wolf, Jeff Dunitz from jeffdunitz.com, thelidblog.com. He also writes for mrctv.org. And other things too. Go to jeffdunitz.com. It's got links to everything there. Juanito Cabrone, Manifesto Pavo from Finland came the farthest to see the Ed Morrissey Show today. Prairie Dog SD, Steve Egg from NoRunnyEggs.com occasionally dips in with some fantastic financial analysis. And by the way, Steve Egg, job report coming out on Friday. I'm going to be bouncing around. I can actually do that, but if you'd like to give it a shot, feel free to guest blog on that. It's up to you. I always like reading your analysis. that doesn't sound good, does it? I always like reading your take. Your take on things. How's that? All right. And via Paso at the Ancestral Morrison Ants. Hi, Mom. And the first mate behind me, keeping me on the straight and narrow. All right, folks, don't forget, no show on Thursday. We're back again a week from today, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. Don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later.